A man spends 40 years pouring concrete so his children never have to know what it feels like when the frost gets into the ground before the foundation does. He comes home every night with limestone dust in the creases of his neck and Portland cement dried into the hair on his forearms, and he tells himself that his kids can see what all of it means. He tells himself they understand that the calluses on his palms are not a flaw. They are a record. Every split knuckle, every cracked nail bed, every joint that swells up stiff in January. That is the ledger of everything he chose to carry so they wouldn't have to. But here is what nobody warns you about when you give a child a soft life. Sometimes they look at the man who built it, and all they see is the dirt. Welcome, friends. Sit down with me for a minute. Before we get into this one, do me a favor and drop a comment down below and tell me where you're tuning in from today. And if you believe an honest man's work deserves respect, hit that subscribe button. It costs you nothing, and it means more than you know. Now, let me tell you about the day I learned that the man who writes the checks is not always the man who gets to sit at the table. To understand how I ended up sitting alone in a folding chair outside the Magnolia Ridge Country Club on a warm Georgia evening in June, while my only son accepted his MBA inside, you have to understand a little bit about Raymond. Raymond Briggs came into my ex-wife Sandra's life about 7 years after our divorce. He was a financial planner out of Atlanta. Slim, well-dressed, the kind of man who had a different watch for every occasion and never seemed to have a single callus anywhere on either hand. He drove a dark green Range Rover, kept his fingernails shaped like they'd been done at a salon, and had the easy, frictionless confidence of a man who had never in his life crawled under a house in January to fix a burst pipe. He was not a bad man. I want to be honest about that. But he was the kind of man my son Marcus had decided, somewhere along the way, that he wanted to become. My name is Earl Denton. I am 63 years old. I run a concrete and masonry company called Denton Stoneworks out of Cartersville, Georgia. The same company I built from a single rented mixer and a used Ford flatbed in 1989. We pour foundations. We set retaining walls. We do commercial slabs and custom decorative work, and we do it right. And we have done it right for 34 years. If you drove through the North Georgia corridor and looked at what was underneath most of the strip malls, the school additions, the church parking lots, the new subdivisions, there is a very good chance that the ground they are standing on is ground my crew poured. My hands show it, both of them. The left one has a ridge of scar tissue along the base of the thumb from a rebar edge back in 2004. My right index finger bends slightly inward at the first joint because I broke it, setting a wall form in 2009, and kept working through it like a fool. The skin on my palms is not smooth. It is thick and layered like old bark. In summer it cracks along the knuckle lines, and I keep a small tin of working man's balm in the cup holder of my truck and use it every morning on the way to the job site. It helps some. But the hands of a man who has been pouring concrete for 40 years are what they are. You do not undo that with lotion. Marcus was my boy, my only child. His mother and I split up when he was 11, and I did what I promised myself I would do, which was show up. Every weekend I could, I was there. I coached his middle school baseball team, even though I had to leave the job site early on Thursdays to make practice. I drove him to every campus visit when he was applying to colleges. When he got into Georgia State's business program, I was the one standing at the back of the auditorium during orientation weekend with my best flannel shirt and my work boots because I had come straight from a site in Marietta, and I did not care who saw. I paid for 4 years of undergraduate. I paid for 2 years of the MBA program on top of that. Not with loans, not with a scholarship. Out of Denton Stoneworks, out of the company I built with those hands, I paid $114,000 in tuition and housing over 6 years. I didn't keep a running tally in front of Marcus. I'm not that kind of man. I just paid the bills because that is what fathers do. The graduation was scheduled for June 7th. Commencement ceremony at Magnolia Ridge Country Club, which the university rented for the occasion because the graduate business program was smaller and liked the prestige of the setting. Marcus called me in early May, about 5 weeks out. I was in my site trailer reviewing a subcontract bid when the phone rang. I set the papers down and picked up. "Hey, son," I said. "What's going on?" There was a pause. Not a long one, but the kind of pause that has weight to it. "Dad," he said, "I need to talk to you about the ceremony, the seating." "Okay," I said. I leaned back in my chair. Outside the trailer window, I could see my crew working the far edge of a commercial pour, the screed board dragging smooth across a fresh slab. "What about the seating?" "So Mom and Raymond are coming," he said. "And Natalie's parents are going to be there." Natalie was his girlfriend of 3 years, a sharp, polished young woman from a wealthy family in Buckhead. And Natalie's father, he's been asked to say a few words at the reception afterward. He knows the dean. "Okay," I said again. I still did not know where we were headed. "Dad," he stopped. Started again. "The reception is being photographed for the program's alumni magazine. They're doing a whole feature on this graduating cohort. Professional photographer, posed family shots at the reception, the whole thing." "Sure," I said. "Sounds like a big deal. You've earned it." Another pause. "I was thinking," Marcus said slowly, and now his voice had dropped into something flat and careful, "that maybe for the official photos you could skip the reception. Just come to the ceremony, and then maybe Raymond could stand in for the family portrait." I did not say anything. "It's just that, Dad, your hands," he stopped again. Then he pushed through it. "Your hands are going to be in the photos, the close-ups. And they look the way they look. And it's going to be in a magazine, and Natalie's family is going to be in those photos. And Raymond looks more," he chose the word carefully, "more appropriate for that kind of setting." I looked down at my left hand, resting on the subcontract papers. The scar along the base of the thumb. The cement gray that had worked its way so deep into the whorls of my fingerprints that I sometimes wondered if my prints would even read on a scanner anymore. "Your hands look like a construction worker's, Dad," Marcus said. "And I just think, for one day, for the photos—" "Say it plain, son," I said. My voice was quiet, steady as a level line. "Your hands are an embarrassment," he said. And then, quieter, "I'm sorry, but they are. Raymond's hands look like they belong there. Yours don't." I sat with that for a moment. The way you sit with a thing that has landed on your chest and knocked the air out of you without making any noise. "I'll be at the ceremony," I said finally. "We'll figure out the rest." I hung up the phone. I set it face down on the papers. Outside, my lead man, a 56-year-old Tennessean named Gerald Webb, who had worked beside me for 19 years, knocked on the trailer door and leaned his head in to ask about the reinforcement schedule for the next morning's pour. He looked at my face and stopped talking mid-sentence. "Everything all right, Earl?" Gerald asked. "Marcus says my hands are an embarrassment," I said. "Wants Raymond in the family photos instead." Gerald was not a man who reacted to things quickly. He had the kind of stillness that came from decades of physical work, the understanding that most problems got worse if you threw energy at them sideways. He looked down at his own hands for a moment, then back up at me. "My daddy worked a steel mill for 31 years, Gerald said. When he walked my sister down the aisle, his hands looked like 2 pieces of old saddle leather. She cried the whole walk, not because she was ashamed, because she knew what they cost him." He looked at me evenly. "The boy will figure out what he lost when he's old enough to understand what it took." Then he went back out to the crew, and I sat there alone in the trailer until the light through the window turned orange. I want to be honest with you, friends. I did not sit there planning anything. I sat there grieving, because a father does not expect to be told that the evidence of his life's work is something to be hidden in the back row. He does not expect to raise a son and have the son look at his hands like they are something that needs to be managed. But I am also a man who reads his contracts. 34 years in business will do that to you. The graduation reception at Magnolia Ridge required a private event host to cover the catering upgrade, the photography package the alumni magazine was using, and the private dining room reservation. The graduate business program covered the base ceremony cost. The premium reception add-ons, the catered dinner, the open bar, the private photographer, the reserved club room. Those required a sponsoring host from the family side to underwrite the cost and sign the club's event liability agreement. Marcus had asked me in February to cover that cost. I had agreed and signed the club's hosting agreement as the primary event guarantor. I had put down a deposit of $4,000 and agreed to cover the remaining balance of $9,200 upon final headcount confirmation, which was due no later than 10 days before the event. That confirmation was due May 28th. Marcus called me on May 25th to tell me my hands were an embarrassment. On May 26th, I called the Magnolia Ridge event coordinator, a professional and unflappable woman named Mrs. Patricia Hollis, who had been managing private events at the club for 22 years and had seen every variety of family complication there was. "Mr. Denton," she said pleasantly, "are we all set for the 7th? "Mrs. Hollis," I said, "I need to discuss a modification to the hosting arrangement." I explained, in plain and businesslike language, that my son had requested that his stepfather, Raymond Briggs, serve as the primary family representative for the reception, including the family photos and the presiding host role at dinner. I told her I felt it was only right that the primary host of record match the man who was going to be standing in the family portraits and receiving the congratulations of the guests. Mrs. Hollis was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, with the measured precision of a woman who had seen this movie before, whether I understood what a change in the primary guarantor would mean for the outstanding balance and the final confirmation deposit. I told her I understood completely. She told me that if Raymond Briggs was to be listed as the primary hosting guarantor, he would need to sign the liability agreement, provide a credit hold for the club's standard event insurance requirement of $7,000, and clear the remaining balance of $9,200, no later than May 28th, or the premium package would revert to the base reception, standard club seating, cash bar, and no private dining room. I thanked her for her time. I overnighted a formal amendment to the hosting agreement, signed and notarized, transferring primary guarantor status to Raymond Briggs of Atlanta, Georgia, and I called my attorney to make sure the transfer of my original deposit back to my account was handled cleanly. Then I put on my good clothes on June 7th and drove to Cartersville. My good clothes are not remarkable. Dark slacks, a navy blazer I bought for my brother's retirement party 4 years ago, a white dress shirt. I do not own a tuxedo. I do not own patent leather shoes. I wore clean dark boots, the good pair I keep for occasions, and I combed my hair back the same way I have combed it since 1987. I washed my hands 4 times with the heavy mechanic soap I keep at home, got them as clean as they were ever going to get, which meant the creases in my knuckles were still gray, and the scar on my left thumb was still there, and my right index finger still bent slightly inward at the first joint. I arrived at Magnolia Ridge at 5 o'clock and found my seat, not in the family section. I had been assigned a seat toward the outer edge of the guest area, politely separated from the primary family grouping where Sandra and Raymond and Natalie's family were arranged. A pleasant seat. A seat with a clear view of the ceremony stage and not much else. I watched Marcus walk across the stage in his black robe and shake the dean's hand and accept his diploma. He looked good. He looked confident and polished, and like a man who was going to do something with himself. I felt proud of him in the way that does not require acknowledgement, the way that just sits in the chest and breathes quietly. At 6 o'clock, the guests moved from the ceremony lawn toward the club building for the reception. I found my place at a table near the side entrance, a perfectly good table. I could see the main room from where I sat. At 6:15, I watched Raymond Briggs approach the front reception desk in his tailored gray suit. He was smiling, the smooth smile of a man who expected the world to behave itself. The event coordinator, a young woman who worked under Mrs. Hollis, stepped out from behind the desk and handed him a leather-bound event folio. Raymond took it with the easy confidence of a man accepting a menu. Then he opened it. I watched it from across the room the way you watch a weather system move across a flat plain. First the smile held, then it did not. His eyes moved down the page, back up, down again. He looked up at the event coordinator with an expression that was asking a question his mouth had not yet formed. She answered it, quietly and professionally, pointing to a line on the second page. Raymond turned to the second page. The smile was entirely gone. He stepped away from the desk and dialed his phone. He was not calling Marcus. I know this because Marcus was 20 feet away taking photos with Natalie and her family, and his phone did not move. Raymond was calling someone else. His bank, I suspected, or his financial advisor. My phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. Sandra. I let it ring. 2 minutes later, Marcus appeared at my table. He was still holding his diploma in its leather sleeve. His jaw was tight. "Dad," he said, "what did you do?" "I'm watching your graduation, son," I said. "Congratulations. You worked hard for that." Raymond is at the front desk. They're saying the private room and the bar and the photographer aren't covered. They're saying the guarantor changed and the new guarantor hasn't cleared the balance. He sat down across from me, his voice low and controlled in the way of a young man trying to stay composed in a public place. "That's $9,000, Dad." $9,200, I said. "And the credit hold. You pulled your name off the contract. You told me Raymond was the appropriate representative for your family." I said. I agreed. A man who is going to stand in the alumni magazine photographs as the family host ought to be the man whose name is on the hosting agreement. That seemed right to me. Marcus stared at me. Behind him, through the glass wall of the club foyer, I could see Raymond talking to Mrs. Hollis now, his hands moving with the quick gestures of a man making an argument he did not expect to lose. "He doesn't have liquid access to $9,000 right now," Marcus said. "He's got most of his capital tied up in a client portfolio restructure. That is a difficult position," I said. "Dad." "Marcus," I said, and I kept my voice the way I keep my hands on a level when the ground wants to shift, steady, flat, and honest. "I paid $114,000 for your education. I paid it out of a company I built with these hands. I put both of them flat on the white tablecloth between us. The scarred ones, the gray-creased ones, the ones that bent slightly wrong. I did not ask you to thank me in a speech. I did not ask for a seat at the head table. I asked to be present at your graduation, and you asked me to be invisible so the photos would look right." Marcus looked at my hands. Not the way a son looks at his father's hands when he is young, that unconscious and total acceptance. The way a man looks at something that is suddenly real to him, in a way it wasn't a moment before. "The man with the smooth hands is currently sorting out a credit problem at the front desk," I said quietly. "These hands have never bounced a payment in 34 years of business." A young woman from the event staff appeared at my elbow and asked if I would like anything from the bar. I ordered a sweet tea. She moved away. Outside the glass wall, Raymond was handing over a credit card, then another one. "The private room and the photographer may or may not happen," I said. "That depends on what Raymond is able to clear. But the base reception will go on. Your guests will have a good evening." I made sure the foundation was paid for. The upgrades were always extras. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Around us, the room was filling with guests, conversations rising, laughter moving through the space, the ordinary warmth of a celebration carrying itself forward on its own momentum. "I shouldn't have said what I said," Marcus said finally. "About your hands." I looked at him. He was 27 years old and he was trying to figure out how to be a man, and nobody gets to skip that part of it, no matter how smooth their trajectory looks on paper. "No," I said. "You shouldn't have." "I was embarrassed," he said. "Natalie's family, they—" He stopped. "I know," I said. "You wanted everything to look a certain way. That's not an excuse." "No," I said. "It isn't." We sat there for a moment with that between us, which was the honest place to leave it. "Natalie's father is going to ask who covers the event shortfall," Marcus said quietly. "Tell him the foundation was laid by the man in the navy blazer at the side table," I said, "and that the man with the smooth hands is working out the premium." Marcus looked at me for a long time. Then he looked back down at my hands on the tablecloth. The scar, the bent finger, the deep, permanent gray in the grain of the skin that 34 years of concrete work leaves in a man and does not take back. He put his hand over mine, both of them. His hands, which were his mother's hands, smooth and long-fingered, laid flat over the rough map of mine. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. That is the thing about the truth when it finally arrives. It doesn't need a speech. It just needs to be allowed to sit there without being argued with. After a few minutes, he went back to his guests. I sat with my sweet tea and watched the room. The private dining room did open, about 40 minutes late, after Raymond managed to clear enough of the balance on a third card to satisfy the minimum. The photographer was there. The photos were taken. I was not in them. I had not been asked, and I did not insert myself. At 8:30 I finished my tea, put on my blazer, and walked out through the side entrance into the warm Georgia night. The parking lot smelled like cut grass and honeysuckle. I could hear the music from the reception drifting out through the open doors behind me. I drove home on the back roads, the way I always do. The windows down, the summer dark coming in through them, the radio off. When I got home, I sat in the driveway for a few minutes before going in. I looked at my hands on the steering wheel in the low light from the dashboard. Every line in them, every scar. The slight wrong angle of the right index finger, catching the light from the porch lamp. There is not a single thing about those hands I would trade. Not one. If you have ever done honest work and been made to feel like it was something to be ashamed of, I want you to leave a comment and let me know. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I hope this story earned it. Come back and sit with me again. I'll have another one ready for you.